of Mr. Yu Kongzhao, Zhao Yukong 先生. Mr. Yu Kongzhao, English name Mike, is a distinguished Chinese American civil rights activist, the co-founder and president of the Asian American Coalition for Education, AACE, and the author of the book, The Chinese Secrets for Success, 5 Inspiring Confucian Values. I'm very lucky to get a copy of the book. I'm reading it right now. So maybe sometime in the future, I will share how I feel about this book, a great book. You don't want to miss it. In May 2015, Mr. Zhao and other Asian American leaders united 64 Asian American organizations and filed a civil rights complaint against Harvard University in order to support students for fair admissions, SFFA, lawsuit against Harvard. As the largest joint action taken by Asian American communities in recent history, the complaint helped expose Ivy League colleges' systematic discrimination against Asian American applicants to the national and world stage. Under his leadership, AACE has made significant progress in advancing Asian American children's equal education rights, including Trump administration's adoption of AACE's policy recommendations on college admissions and its lawsuit against Yale University. In 2021, AACE united over 300 Asian American organizations nationwide and submitted an amicus brief to the US Supreme Court in support of SFA's lawsuit against Harvard. In addition to fighting for Asian American children's equal education rights, Mr. Zhao also contributes columns in Orlando Sentinel, National Review, Daily Caller, Forbes, Washington Examiners, The World Journal, Singdao Daily, and India West to promote Chinese culture and advance Asian American social progress. Currently, Mike Zhao is also a Republican candidate for Florida State House District 45. Let's welcome Mr. Yukong Mike Zhao.
Thank you, Wayne. Good afternoon and good morning for the West Coast. And I think it's our great honor, on behalf of Asian American Coalition for Education, it is our great honor to invite Mr. Edward Blum to give a speech on Asian Americans' lawsuits against Harvard Universities and the University of North Carolina. At first, I want to express my sincere thanks to all the attendees here in Orlando and also nationwide and through online access. And I think I want to thank you for spending the weekend time with us to support us. But I want to tell you, your time will be well spent because what Mr. Blum is going to talk matters to the equal education rights for our children, our children's children, and generations to come. Let me tell you how important it is. As you know, as early as 1882, Asian Americans, especially Chinese Americans, suffered miserably from the severe discrimination of the Chinese Exclusion Act, which is the first law in this country used race-based policy to limit Chinese immigrants here. After the Chinese, unfortunately, ever since that, Asian American never escaped from such race-based policy, from the discrimination by such policies. After that law being repealed, the race-based affirmative action began to discriminate against us. and limiting our children's enrollment in college admission. Year after year, the discrimination against our children deteriorated. From 2007 to 2012, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Daniel Gordon, Princeton professor Thomas Aspen Shader, and also Mr. Ron Ernst published many books, articles, reveal the severe discrimination against our children, including higher admission standards, racial stereotype, and racial quotas, especially the racial quotas, okay? When Asian American the population doubled in this country, but Ivy League schools still use the same percentage to admit our children. So that lead to severe workload. All children have to work very hard, not only academics be exceptionally good, also have to get national awards in many competitions, also like leadership and also volunteers. So our children, many children suffer from like depression, some psychology issues, even suicide, right? So in the face of such unlawful and immoral discrimination, Asian Americans already began to fight, right? In 1988, Chinese Asian Americans already filed the first civil rights complaint against Harvard. You guess what? The American ruling class, they whitewashed, all complaint. They start invested a few years, found some improper use of racial stereotype by Harvard, but they did nothing out of that. And from 2006 to 2013, Li Jian, Michael Wang, and another Indian American student filed a civil rights complaint against the Ivy League schools. However, again, the Obama administration whitewashed it. As a politically marginalized minority, Asian Americans was too weak to really change, to fight against this. Here comes Mr. Edward Blum. In 2014, he led Students for Fair Admission, filed a lawsuit against Harvard University and University of North Carolina. He was able to raise millions of dollars, hire the top lawyer in the nation. Many of the lawyers used to be clerk for the US Supreme Court Justice. I met them, excellent lawyers. So he was going to help us. You guess what? The liberal ruling class, they did not give up. They used the radio and media to launch a personal attack against Mr. Edward Blum. So after I heard about that, I convened a conference call with Professor Chun-Yan Lee, Dr. Jack Oya, and many other funders of AACE. We said, we cannot allow the liberal media to jeopardize these lawsuits. Asian American alone, we could not make it happen. So we need support. That's the reason we united 64 Asian American organizations, filed the civil rights complaint against Harvard 6 months later. So, today, I want to tell you the good news is after 7 years, legal battles, this case already reached the US Supreme Court. And the good thing about that is right now, there are at least six constitutional justices. They will, they will rule this case based on the US Constitution. In the US Constitution, they have never been allowed, like a 14th Amendment of the US Constitution, allowed a race-based policy, right? So there's good chance, we can strike down the race-based college admission, once for all. If we are able to achieve that, and then our children's children, the generation to come will have no discrimination against them in college admission from race-based policy. So today, I feel the same kind of urgency, just like 7 years ago. We need, do our best. The Asian American community, we need to do our best to support Mr. Edward Blum and the students for admission. Two things we can support. Number one is what Mr. Blum is going to talk about, is join the fight, join the lawsuits, okay? That is number one. He will elaborate. Number two, I will elaborate later. And it's really join our amicus brief to sign up, co-sign for organizations to really speak out. And when we submit the amicus brief to the US Supreme Court, so the justice will hear our voice, but I will elaborate a little bit later on. But let's welcome Mr. Blum. He is our hero. He's fighting for our interest. You know, please welcome.
Mr. Li Hongzhao, he's the co-organizer of today's event, but we also have co-organizer, which is OCPA, Orlando Chinese Professional Association. So after Mr. Edward Blum's speech, I'll invite their representative to come up here. Little introduction of Mr. Blum or Blum? Blum, okay, B-L-U-M, Blum. Mr. Edward Blum is the founder and president of Students for Fair Admission. In 2014, SFFA sued Harvard and the University of North Carolina on behalf of Asian American children. Under his outstanding leadership, SFFA has raised significant resources to hire some of the top lawyers of our nation who investigated over Harvard's admissions data, which revealed many facts on Harvard and UNC's anti-Asian discrimination. With great efforts by Mr. Blum and his legal team, both the Harvard and UNC cases have reached the US Supreme Court. Now let's welcome Mr. Edward Blum. Okay, right on the spot.
Well, thank you, Yukong. Thanks for everyone for attending this event. Thank you, Wei, for that very nice introduction. Everyone has done a very good job in describing who I am and what briefly these lawsuits are all about. But let me go into some detail now and talk a little bit about, eventually talk about how you can help with this. So the mission of Students for Fair Admissions, the reason this organization was formed, the ultimate reason was to eliminate the use of race and ethnicity as a factor in college admissions. I'm going to say that again, so there's no confusion. We believe that a student's race and ethnicity, whether they're Chinese, Indian, Pakistani, white, Hispanic, doesn't matter, African American, we believe that race and ethnicity should not be used to help a student gain admission to a university or harm a student gain admission to a university.
他说呢，这个学生公平入学组织，也就是他的这个组织，简称叫 SFFA。他们的主要的目标呢，就是要消除各个大学在录取学生的过程中呢，用这个种族来做一个评判的标准。那么他们觉得呢，一个学生的种族，不论你是华人还是其他的印度裔、西班牙裔、黑人、白人，这个是不应该用来作为衡量这个入学的一个标准。所以呢，这个种族既不应该帮助你顺利的进入学校，更不应该伤害和阻止你被大学录取。
So as Yukong explained, in 2014, Students for Fair Admissions sued Harvard and the University of North Carolina alleging that their admissions policies were unfair and unconstitutional. Now, specifically with regard to Harvard, we assert that Harvard raises the bar for Asian American applicants, while lowering the bar for whites, Hispanics, and African Americans. So one race, Asian Americans, has the bar raised. The other races have the bar, including whites, have the bar lowered for them. As Yukong noted, after 7 years of litigation in which we lost in the lower courts and we lost at the Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court granted review of this case, of these two cases, and an argument will be made probably this coming October.
他说呢，在2014年的时候，他的这个组织就学生公平入学组织 SFFA 就是起诉了哈佛包括北卡的一个大学，就是起诉他们在录取学生的过程中对亚裔有种族歧视这种现象。那么他们起诉是有根据的，他们提供收集了大量的这种数据那么他们认为呢，这个大学，尤其是哈佛大学，在录取学生的时候，他们提高了这个录取亚裔的这个门槛。比方说，我们没有任何的优惠，我们没有任何的加分，但是反而降低了这个录取的门槛，针对白人、黑人还有西班牙裔，他们的门槛就非常低。在经过了7年的这个法律的争取之后，在那个低级的法庭吧，就是我们第一档次的法庭呢，我们是输了这场官司。另外呢，在申诉的时候也输了。但是幸运的是呢，现在这个案件在去年1月份的时候已经达到了高级法院并且呢，他们同意要重新的审阅所有这些资料，在今年的10月份大概要重新的能够给他们一个去申诉的机会。
So, Students for Fair Admissions is a nonprofit membership organization. This is important, a membership organization. When we filed our lawsuit back in 2014, we only had about 30 members. One of those members was a student from Northern California who had been rejected from Harvard. Today, we have over 20,000 members, 20,000 members. Now, this is important because some of our members have applied to Harvard and have applied to the University of North Carolina and were rejected. Their members rejected. We as an organization have the right to bring these lawsuits. So it is not the rejected student that is the named plaintiff. It's Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard, Students for Fair Admissions versus the University of North Carolina. It's not like Yukong Zhao or Lily Wong versus Harvard. It's Students for Fair Admissions. And that's important because I want to stress this now. No student's name or identity has ever been made public, nor will it ever be made public. The dozens of students that are our members that have been rejected from Harvard and rejected from the University of North Carolina, their identities will never be made public.
他说呢 ，SFFA 是一个会员制的非营利组织。那么他们主要吸取什么样的会员呢？就是你的家中肯定有这个小孩子，他在申请这些大学的时候，包括特别是哈佛还有北卡大学的时候被拒绝了，那么你就可以加入成为会员。那在当初他们刚刚成立的时候呢，只有30名会员，但是到今天已经发展到有2万会员了。而且特别重要的呢，它有一点就是要告诉大家，可能你在申诉，比方说你在告哈佛这些大学的时候，以前呢都是这个孩子的名字，然后 对抗哈佛或者其他大学，很多人是心里有担忧的。但是因为有他们这个组织，就是叫学生公平入学组织，现在呢，他来代理所有这些被拒的学生，你以这个组织的名义来对抗哈佛这些律师团队或者北卡律师团队，那么这些孩子他是得到保护的，他的名字还有他的身份等等都不会公布于众的。
So I will go into some detail at the end of my talk about how you can join Students for Fair Admissions and help us during this last phase of our lawsuit. But let me now just briefly tell you what was revealed about Harvard and what we learned because of the lawsuit. First, Asian American applicants to Harvard as a whole are stronger on all objective measures than any other racial group, including the following: higher in test scores, higher in academic achievement, that is, grade point average, the number of AP classes taken, and extracurricular activities. Extracurricular, test scores, grades, Asian Americans are highest of the four groups. Second, Asian American applicants suffer a statistically significant penalty rather compared to other racial groups in two areas that the admissions officers assign. The first area is called the personal rating, and I'll go into some more detail about that. And then the second is the overall rating. And then finally, I'll get through this. And then finally, what we learned was that race, a student's race, plays the predominant role in whether a student is going to be admitted or rejected. Not a little factor of a factor, but the predominant role.
他说呢，这几年因为他要起诉哈佛还有这些大学，所以他们研究搜集了很多很多的资料。那他这里呢也汇总了一下。首先第一个呢，他们发现就说这个亚裔学生作为一个整体来说，在各个方面都是非常强的，非常了不起的。就说我们刨开种族不算我们看其他的，我们在学校的考试成绩，我们各个方面的表现，包括我们业余课外的活动等等在整个这个族群里边，我们都是最棒最强的，这是第一点。第二点呢，他说据统计我们亚裔学生呢遭受了就是说两个非常大的，就是等于是很无辜的就被学校用来惩罚我们，在录取的时候不公平的对待我们。一个呢，他们就是叫个人的这种评分。他说他之后会详细的来讲解这个他只是这里还有一个是总体的评分，就是不知道为什么我们华裔亚裔就会在这两方面却反而被打分很低，而且是为此而受到了惩罚。另外一点呢，他们在研究发现这个种族这个概念在学校决定我录取你还是我不录取你的时候起到了关键性的作用。
Students for Fair Admissions reviewed over 160,000 applications, right?
That's right.
就是说，他们审阅了16万份这个学生的这个是申请材料 ，OK， 得出了方向性 ，OK， 这是非常值这个是 objective。
So the last thing that we discovered was that Harvard systematically balances its incoming freshman class by race year after year after year. In other words, they have a quota. So now let me give you some what this really means in the real world. How does this affect your sons and daughters when they apply to Harvard and frankly, other Ivy League schools. So we have an example, an Asian American male who is applying to Harvard, who is not disadvantaged. He doesn't come from a lower socioeconomic strata. He comes from a middle strata. And let's say that this Asian American male has a 25% chance of admissions based upon his qualifications. Okay, 25% chance based upon his SAT, his grades, his extracurricular activities, all of the factors that go in. Now, if you change his race from Asian American to white, his chances of admissions goes up to 36%. Everything stays the same, grades, SAT, all the same. If you change his race to Hispanic, his chance of admissions goes up to 77%. And if you change his race to African American, his chance of admission goes up to 95%. So the same qualifications, the same academic achievement, if you change the race for the other three racial groups, their chances of admissions go up significantly.
他说呢，哈佛它就是系统性的根据你的不同的种族来分配，说你这个种族我要多少比例，这个种族多少比例。那么他们有非常实际的这个统计的数据，比方说给你一个例子有一个亚裔的男孩子，男学生，他呢并不是出自于贫困家庭，我们都考虑是比方正常的中产阶级的家庭出来的。那他各个方面呢，比方说他的 SAT 的成绩学校的成绩各个方面表现都还是很不错的。那这种情况下呢，就是比方因为他的种族是亚裔，所以他被这个哈佛录取的百分比呢就是25%。但是同等情况，就是也是中产阶级，也是个男孩子，什么其他都一样，就把他换成了一个白人的话，他被录取的比例就变成了36%。然后同样的情况，如果换成西班牙裔的话，录取率就马上变成77%，就已经是超过了双倍了但如果你是非裔黑人的话，你马上录取率就是95%了。
So here are the differences in SAT scores. Asian Americans have the highest SAT scores of any racial group to Harvard. They are about 25 points higher than, as a group, white applicants, about 154 points higher as a group than Hispanic applicants, and about 218 points higher as a group than Asian American applicants.
咱们这个亚裔确实是非常的聪明根据这个统计就是所有申请哈佛的这些人里边其中呢，按照这个评分 SAT 的分数的话，亚裔是最高的，亚裔的 SAT 成绩最高。那么做个比较的话，你们真是难以置信，就是亚裔的平均 SAT 分数高过白人25%，高过西班牙24.9分，24.9大概25分，那么高过西班牙裔153.9分，高过黑人217.7分。
If Harvard relied exclusively on a purely academic index, it is likely that the Asian American incoming class at Harvard would be over 50% Asian American. And that shouldn't be a surprise when we look at comparable schools such as Caltech, the University of California at Berkeley and the University of California at Los Angeles. Their Asian percentages far exceed 50%.
如果根据这个我们这些孩子的成绩来录取的话，那么这个大学里的学生亚裔应该是占50%以上的。他说他如果看，比方说伯克利大学呀，还有这个洛杉矶大学啊，这些学校里确实是他的亚裔学生的比例是在50%。
So let me now turn to what I think is the scandal that we uncovered about Harvard's admissions policy. And that scandal involves the consistent and pervasive demerits, the lowering of Asian American scores on the personality tests, the personality ratings. On the personal ratings, this is Harvard's assignment of what your personal abilities are. Asian Americans are judged to be less likable, less personable, and less kind. They score low in leadership capabilities and courage. And I find this, and most Americans find this, to be deeply troubling.
刚才他之前谈到，就是说我们亚裔的学生被他们打了2个标签，说我们一个是个人，一个是整体的那个水准很低。在这里呢，他就谈到了这个个人水准。这个哈佛大学就给了我们非常非常低的分数，就个人，一个是个人的能力，包括就是说你自己还有社交能力，你的领导能力，就是这些都把亚裔，而且说很不被人喜欢，对，又不善良，反正就是把我们打的这个分数是很低的。
So let's turn now to what Harvard has done over the years. So in 1993, a long 20 years ago, in 1993, 20% of Harvard's incoming freshman class were Asian Americans. 10 years later, in 2003, that percentage dropped to about 16.4%. Now, 10 years later, the year we sued, 2014, Asian Americans made up 17.5% of the incoming freshman class. So over a 20-year period, Asian enrollment at Harvard declined by about 3 percentage points, give or take a percentage point year after year after year. During this period of time, during this 20-year period of time, the number of Asian applicants to Harvard grew significantly.
就说在回顾历史的话，在1993年的时候，哈佛录取亚裔学生的比例是20%，但是呢，10年之后，在2003年的时候，这个百分比就从20%降到了16.4%。那么又过了10年之后，在2014年，那么同一年，我们这个组织呢，不是起诉了哈佛吗？他们录取亚裔学生的比例是17.5%，也就是说，在过去20年的时间里，我们只是说平均了，我们的录取率降低了3%。你觉得好像3%不多，但是想一想，我们学生申请哈佛的人数和比例，在这20年是大幅度的增长，翻了多少番？但是比例却降了。
So over a 20-year period of time, year after year, the percentage stays the same. Now, it is against the law to do racial balancing like this, but the percentage of Asian Americans was the same virtually year after year after year for 20 years. But guess what has happened to Harvard's admissions policies or the admissions results since we sued Harvard in 2014. So A few days ago, Harvard announced that their incoming freshman class, the class of 2026, will now be 27.9% Asian American, almost 28%. Now think about this. That's an increase of 60% over a 7-year period of time, only because of this lawsuit. So how is it that for 20 years, Harvard's admissions percentages were flat, but the minute they get sued, year after year, it goes up? Now, what Harvard will tell you, and what others will tell you, is that why are Asian Americans upset about this? Their admissions rate are up 60%. So we cannot be lulled into thinking that there is no longer a problem at Harvard, that there is no longer a problem at other competitive universities, including the University of North Carolina.
他说呢，在过去的20年，每一年我们看到，从20%降，然后它就保持在17%或者低于17%的这个，但是这是20年都没有变化，而我们申请的学生人数是在增加的。那么突然，在我们递交了申诉，在打这场官司的过程中，不久前哈佛就宣布了。说他们2026年这个年度的学校就要录取27.9%的亚裔学生，这个突然之间就比之前增长60%，而且是发生在我们起诉哈佛之后。那么很多人可能就觉得，我已经对这个结果很满意了。另外呢，可能那些哈佛的律师团队呀，或者那些原来对这个亚裔造成伤害，说你们应该满意了吧？我们已经给你这个好的结果了。但是从律师的角度说，我们不能掉以轻心，因为现在这个法律在进行的过程中，我们能够看到这样的结果。但是之后呢，对不对？将来呢？所以我们还是要多了解一下。
So we need your help. Because we're a membership organization, we want to add new members every single year. So I'd encourage you to go to our website, studentsforfairadmissions.org, studentsforfairadmissions.org, and join the organization. It's a one-time $10 membership fee. That's it, lifetime membership for $10. And here's what we want you to do when you do that. We want to know if you have a son or a daughter in high school. If you have a son or a daughter in high school, I want to know about it. I want to know son or daughter, what their name is, when they're going to graduate. And here's why I want to know that. I want to submit to the court, not a paper document. I want to be able to represent that there are dozens and dozens of high school students who will be applying to Harvard in the years to come. Next year, the year after that. And that the Supreme Court must act on ending the use of race and ethnicity in college admissions so that these children will have the same opportunities as every other child. So go to the website, join, send me information about if you have a child in high school. I will get back to you personally on this and tell you how you can help. One final important point about this. Let me go back to what we talked about. Your name will never be made public. These documents are never going to be put on the internet. They're never going to be put in a format that people will learn your name or your son or daughter's name. Everything remains anonymous.
他说他们这个组织呢，非常需要我们所有亚裔的支持。那么如果你愿意加入成为会员的话呢，非常简单，他们有一个网站，到时候可以发给大家，叫 studentsforfairadmissions.org。那么你们可以到上面去注册，会员费呢是10块钱，是终身的，所以我们也会从中受益。另外呢，他特别提到，假如您家里有正在上高中的学生，儿子、女儿的话呢，你们也可以就是给他们发给他信息，比方说他们现在上几年级了，因为考虑到在高中嘛，过去可能明年，也许过几年他就要上大学，他会不会申请哈佛或者北卡的大学、其他的学校？那么会不会面临这种种族歧视的问题？我们都有可能，对吧？都可能不能避免。那么在这种情况，他说他收到你们的信息之后，会亲自给你们发信息、邮件了解情况。另外呢，在接下来申请大学的过程中，他希望能够尽到他的力量，就是避免这种种族歧视的情况发生。另外就是说，反正大家有什么问题的话，他在这个我们活动的后边也会有提问，所以呢，也欢迎大家继续留下来把你们的问题想一想哈。
So the website has my email and it has my cell phone number. I make this available because it's important that people who have questions, people who have ideas, people who learn about kids who have been rejected from Harvard or rejected from the University of North Carolina can just call me. I am available. Just call me or send me an email or send me a text. And I want to talk to you. I want to learn about your situation, what happened to you and your children. So thank you very much.
他的网站上有他个人的电话号码、email， 所以呢，你们可以跟他联系。特别是假如你亲身经历过这种孩子申请学校被歧视，或者担忧将来有可能这样的情况发生的话，他欢迎你们跟他联系，因为他个人的手机号也在那里。我相信他对这方面非常有经验，可以给予大家很大的帮助。Thank you. Okay, our next speaker, let's welcome Mr. Sam Chen. He is the Vice President of Orlando Chinese Professional Association, OCPA, and has helped organize many social, educational, and charity events. He is also president of Tsinghua, in Chinese, Tsinghua 大学 Club of Florida. He organized the 2020 presidential election moderated debate in Mandarin series. He is the owner of ChenWorks LLC, a boutique software company that primarily caters to the retail and distribution industries in Texas. He cares deeply about fair opportunities for Asians in the fields of immigration, education, political participation, and media exposure. Let's welcome Mr. Sam Chen.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. And I feel like after a long speech from Mr. Ed Blum, anything I say on this topic will fall short. After all, I'm not a specialist on the fair admissions or fair educational opportunities, but I'm here today to represent OCPA, Orlando Chinese Professional Association, a very large Chinese organization, very prominent in the Orlando area. Of course, the other one is OCA. So OCPA is very honored to co-organize this event for the public today. And we made the decision to work with Mr. Zhao Yukong on this event because we feel like this particular issue directly impacts our community. In particular, it affects the welfare of our community. OCPA, most of our members are Chinese immigrants, as you may know. And as immigrants, we know we face a lot of actual challenges in life in America when we compare ourselves to, let's say, native-born counterparts. Okay, so many of us channel our ambition and hope through our children. And one of the most important channels is education. So when the elite colleges in America, when they set up higher bar for Asian students, particularly Indian, Chinese, Pakistani, and a few other Asian ethnicities, essentially they are robbing Asian students of the fruit of their labor because they work hard for it and they're getting nothing, right? Nothing or short of their expectation. And Asian students, they never work alone. Their parents always over them, right? Over them, trying to make them harder or giving them directions. So at the same time, their parents, they are left deeply hurt, disappointed, and to be honest, they are angry at the same time. So I've been a community leader in the Chinese community for probably over a decade. And I can tell you this, every year I have Chinese parents come forward to me and say, hey, I think my kids, they got relegated to a lower tier college just because they're Asian. I never believed this, but it's happening to me. And this practice of having stricter or higher requirements for Asian students is particularly notorious for Asian boys. For Asian boys, it's worse than for Asian girls. But today, as community leader to represent my community, I have to be a little bit fair, okay? So within our community, there are voices in the opposite direction. The typical points I hear, one of them is saying, okay, Asian students, they have already been overrepresented in the elite colleges, sometimes by a large margin compared to their racial percentage of the entire US population. It's one view I hear often. Another view is Asians, they have to make some sort of self-sacrifice to maintain a harmonious relationship with the other races. Otherwise, they may get resented by the other racial communities. Think of what happened like over 100 years ago. And then some others say, hey, it's time for Asian parents and kids to give up their so much focus on higher education. So today, I think there's no better way or opportunity to bring answers, clarifications, and some encouragements and good arguments on this topic than to have Mr. Ed Blum here telling us what he's done and what he thinks. Because I've always been a huge fan. I see news reports on your work in the newspapers, sometimes like I think Wall Street Journal and some of the others. And you have led a national campaign on this front, both legally and culturally. You're changing our culture. And I also want to express my deep gratitude to Mr. Zhao, because Mr. Zhao is not only the organizer, main organizer, we are a co-organizer, but to be honest, he is taking the initiative. He has taken a lot of passion onto this issue. So he's a mounting figure in the Asian community who has fought vocally and tirelessly for fair education opportunities. So at last, I just want to, I think of this phrase, you might have heard of it in America, which is justice may be late, but it will not be absent in the end. And I think what Mr. Ed Blum is doing for us today is to show, hey, in America, maybe things are not perfect. Maybe college admissions are not fair for Asian students, but there is a legal mechanism we can work through. It may take years, but if unfairness or injustice exists, then eventually we can use the system to address the issue. Do you need me to translate in Chinese, Ms. Zhao? No? Okay. It's not easy I see a lot of familiar faces. Again, our organization, including me as the representative, think this concerns everyone else because most of us will have children, will have grandchildren. If we're going to stay in this country, we're going to have generations after generations. And remember what Dr. Martin Luther King said, right? He was hoping one day everyone would be judged by his or her merits or abilities or talents, not by his skin color. But this is essentially happening to Asian kids, unfortunately. So thank you again, Mr. Blum. It's very nice to meet you and hear all the stats and the encouragement from you.
Our next guest speaker, Ms. Lily Cummings. Ms. Lily Cummings is a Christian, wife, mother, and a small business owner. She is the president of Orlando Chinese Association, the president of Orlando Chinese Performing Art Group, also the Orange County Republican Party Executive Committee member. And she's also Mrs. Orlando of 2016. She was the leader of Chinese Americans for Trump movement in Florida in 2016. Let's welcome Ms. Lily Cummings.
Thank you everyone for coming. Firstly, we are so honored to have Mr. Blum here with us. And also I want to thank Mr. Zhao for organizing this educational seminar. We are as the first generation of Asian Americans. We believe in working hard to provide the best education environment for our children. I'm so grateful of Mr. Blum, Mr. Blum's legal team and the AACE behalf on our Asian parents and our children to fight for the equal education and working opportunities and to have our voice to be heard in the US Supreme Court. Thank you.
Our next VIP guest speaker, Mr. Wei Zhou from Jacksonville. He's the president of Jacksonville Chinese Association. Please welcome.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for organizing such a wonderful event. Actually, I wasn't prepared for a speech. No one told me that I was going to give a talk. But you know, being here, I feel like this is a great opportunity, definitely to share some thoughts with everyone here. So actually, I became a little bit about myself. So I was born and raised in mainland China, Henan province. And I came to the United States 10 years ago, 12 years ago for doctorate education. And now I graduated and I've been working in Jacksonville. So today I came from Jacksonville. Actually, I became the president of Jacksonville Chinese Association very recently, like last year, during
Can you all hear me?你们大家能听到我说话吗？可以 chat 一下，或者是说一下。所以可能是现场那边这个线路断掉了。